Hello everyone, my name is Gabriel Galway and I am a DM or Dungeon Master for Dungeons and Dragons. I've been playing this game for about 10 years of my life, and so I wanted to share with you some of my experience. I want to show you what I think about the game and teach you some tips and tricks on how to play. And ultimately, I want to make this game as digestible and accessible for all of you out there who are curious about the game but might be a bit intimidated by the numbers and the amount of dice, and you just don't know where to start. Maybe you're really bad at math, you hate numbers, or perhaps you're rather quiet and not a big performer of sorts. Maybe you just don't think you're good at doing voices, and maybe you think that's a necessary part of the game, or maybe you just don't know where to begin. There's lots of books out there, and it feels like there's a lot to study and take in before you can actually hop into a game. And no one's got time for any of that. So I'm here to tell you that you can play D&D with nothing more than a friend or two, a few scrap pieces of paper, which are optional, and some sort of dice, be it a digital set on your phone, a regular dice, or just one of the many different types that are out there. All you really need is a little imagination, an open mind, and the want to play this game and to just give it a go. I think Dungeons and Dragons can typically, for some people at least, reek of nerd. Even the designs and the aesthetics of a lot of the books and the merchandise can turn people away. You might think that D&D is typically killing monsters in a fantasy world, casting spells, and speaking in an old Shakespearean accent. But what about a cyberpunk game, where one of the characters builds and speaks to robots? Or a game set in a dystopian future and you play as a cat? Or what about a world where everyone plays as cute little woodland animals and suddenly the genre switches to some horror game and the duck has lost their leg to a twisted fox demon who wants to boil them in a stew? The genre, the story, the characters, they're all variables. The game itself can be whatever you want it to be. So if D&D can be anything, what the heck is D&D? In my opinion, at its core, Dungeons and Dragons is a collaborative storytelling experience, an improv acting session where one person, the DM or Dungeon Master, narrates a story to the other players. They describe the environments, put obstacles and conflicts in front of the players, and they leave a trail of breadcrumb plot hooks to entice the players to follow along the pre-written narrative that they want them to go down. And so the DM needs to be able to improvise and react to whatever the players do in this world, just to keep the story moving. The players are typically the protagonists of this story, and the DM has created a sandbox world with a story for them to interact and take part in. For example, to keep it super simple, maybe the players have been asked to save a princess in a tower. How they go about that is entirely up to them. Going back to you, the DM, you are the one creating this tower. Is it tall? What's it made of? What's inside it, and how do you get into it? Is it surrounded by a moat of lava? Is there a rickety rope bridge? Does a big pink lady dragon guard the sleeping princess? Is it just the tower from Shrek? I'll make a video soon which will be more focused on helping DMs with world building. But for now, I just advise you to create a castle. But don't necessarily create the answers on how to get in and save the princess. Leave that part to the players. And will the players even bother to go save the princess in the first place? What's in it for them? What plot hooks have you got to entice them into the game and take part in this adventure? Are they guaranteed the safety of their swamp in return for the princess, for example? Going back to Shrek. And that's all well and good, but also then the players, it's up to you to figure out how and why your characters want to save this princess. Because if you decide, no, I don't want to save her and I want to go down some other route, well, maybe there's no story there. This is a collaborative storytelling game, and the DM can feed you as many enticing story hooks as they like. But in the end of the day, it's up to you to grab hold of those and say, yes, I want to go down this experience together. Now, I'm just keeping all of this super simple, like I said, and I'll do a video later about railroading as a DM. But for now, I just want to get across the concept of the game being a collaborative storytelling experience. And this is just a very simple introduction to D&D. So, the DM creates the obstacle or conflict, and it's up to you, the players, to figure out how they're going to overcome it. Do you cross over the rickety rope bridge? Do you paraglide into the castle? Or do you go find another dragon, fly that one into the tower, and have it fight the bad dragon for you while you race off with parachutes back to town? And does that all work out okay? Do the parachutes take you as far as you need to go? Is your dragon strong enough to defeat the other one? How do you determine these things? Does the DM decide, or do you? So the next biggest thing about D&D, and what really makes it a unique storytelling experience, with unpredictable events, and what really forces a lot of improvisation, are the dice. So these guys simulate chance in your games. Typically, in D&D, we use what's called a D20, which just means a dice with 20 sides. Your regular dice that you roll for Cluedo, Ludo, and Monopoly would be called, in D&D terms, a D6, or a 6-sided dice. In other tabletop games, I'll use what's called a D100, and this will just give you a random number between 1 and 100. So usually, whenever you want to achieve anything in the game, you'll roll a dice. If you roll high, you succeed. If you roll low, you typically fail. A 20-sided dice gives you a nice broad variety of numbers to work with, but if you are just playing a very casual game at home, you can always just pull out one of the 6-sided dice from one of your board games, or even just flip a coin. Heads you succeed, tails you fail. Or on your D6, or your 6-sided dice, if you roll a 1, you fail. If you roll a 6, you succeed. And then anything in between that can be up to your own discretion. Typically, the DM has the final say in what they think works for the narrative or not. So, what they might say, for a particularly difficult task, you need to roll a 5 or higher to achieve that task. Or, for a very easy job, maybe you just need to roll a 2 or more. Now, you're parachuting off the tower, the princess at your side, and you roll the dice. And you get a 2. So now it's up to the DM to determine just how badly things are going to go for you, based on what you've rolled. You feel the weight of gravity pulling you down. The seams of the cheap parachute you bought start to come undone. You're right over the river of lava now, and an intense updraft of heat is enough to tear apart the weakened parachute, and you fall. One DM might tell you fall to your death, burn in hell, and the game is over. And that would make perfect sense, absolutely. However, another DM might say, well, they didn't roll an outright fail, so maybe I'll give them a second chance. You collapse onto the wooden rope bridge. The rotting planks break your fall. They break under your weight, but you manage to grab hold of one part of the bridge and now dangle over the lava, one hand holding on for dear life, the other holding the princess. What do you do? So here, as the DM, or the narrator of the story, you can leave this part up to the players. But if they are struggling to decide, you can give them a few options if you like. Typically, you'll find that newer players find it much more helpful if you give them a hand on deciding what to do. But others, they might have a very clear idea on what they want to do and they know exactly how they're going to attempt it. But for this example, let's say you're deciding on one of two options. Try and save the princess, or let her go and pull yourself up to safety. Now, to pull both you and the princess up onto the bridge is going to be pretty difficult. You're already hanging on with one hand onto a bit of rope. So, in order to succeed here, you need to roll a 6 on the 6-sided dice. But, if you drop her, all of a sudden, this challenge is way easier as you're only pulling yourself up onto the bridge. You've thrown her into the lava, and so now you only need to roll a 3 or higher. And it's situations like this that make Dungeons & Dragons so interesting. The dice takes away some of the control from the storyteller and gives it to the players. But ultimately, it helps to create a story where no one knows how it will end. You work together to build a world and adventure. You write your plots, build your heroes, but in the end of the day, they're all just temporary. And at the core of Dungeons & Dragons, it all comes down to just a bunch of friends improvising to the roll of a dice. No one has control. And when no one has control, anything can happen. I really hope that you just give D&D a go. Just get a bunch of friends, get a dice, get a coin, get scrap pieces of paper, whatever you like, and start telling a story together. There are obviously a lot of rule books and everything else like that out there that help to give a little more structure to that whole random element of D&D. And I'll go into some other videos in the future on making sense of all of those numbers and stats and rules that are out there. I want to really break it down for you, make it super simple, and just make this whole game much more approachable if you do want to go down that side. Obviously, you don't have to touch the books, you can just make up stories, but if you crave more, come back here, I'll make some more videos, and I'll start teaching you how to play. Have a lovely, lovely day wherever you are, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.